Hello, good evening, and welcome to the TNT Show. I'm John Drummond, and I'm your host for the next 60 minutes. And I think at the end of it, you'll be saying to yourself, my, that was a well worth 60 minutes, an hour of my time. Thanks for joining us on Indy Live. You probably know that this show is available on a range of different media: Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, etc. And of course, you can watch a recording on YouTube where you'll find all the other shows that we've done. And we're now on to our 142nd TNT show. There are many very well-funded organizations who couldn't match that achievement. So we're very proud of it, and we owe most of the credit to you for being our audience. And again, thanks to you, Indy Live continues to grow and add more new shows. But as always, the channel needs your support. So please do what you can to help. Well, you know, it's been another great day for British democracy. The Lib Dems are being accused of being illiberal. And next week, we talk to Emma Walker, who has first-hand experience of abuse at the Lib Dems. Now, you've seen all of the SNP's internal operations laid bare for the world, and in particular BBC Scotland, to comment on. We're going to be doing a bit of that next week, this time with the Lib Dems. I want to bring to your attention, if you haven't seen it, a quote from Professor John Curtis, the psephologist, and he's talking about Labour, and this is what he says. He says, Labour made a choice about which red wall to try to regain. Was it the North of England red wall or the Scotland red wall? In going for the North of England red wall, they basically had to give up on Scotland, although of course they would never admit it. So, regardless of what you see in the public prints and on broadcasting, that's the reality. That's from a guy who actually knows what he's talking about and isn't paid to give you a twisted version of the facts. So if you want to be enlightened rather than being gaslighted, then that quote from Professor Curtis is probably helpful. Meanwhile, the Scottish economy grew 4 times the rate of the UK economy. Now, as you might imagine, as this is a positive story, you should not expect to see much of any coverage on BBC Scotland, because, as we know, they are the folks who avoid good news but accentuate the negative. Still, on the theme of positive stories, tonight we are talking to Nancy McIver and Neil MacDonald about the Indy2Cafe. Now, if you haven't heard of the Indy2Cafe, let me tell you what it is. It's a group of pensioners who got together during lockdown and opened Zoom every afternoon and evening to encourage people, especially those living at home and alone, to pop in for a blether. They then decided to take the cafe to Indy rallies to offer refreshments to the foot soldiers for a donation. The monies raised, and they've been substantial, are used to help food banks, baby banks, and homeless projects, as well as others. An exceptionally laudable objective, I would suggest. Well, as you know, the TNT show is live and it's free. So no license, no problem. We'll be taking your questions live. So if you want to ask a question, you'll find the details on the screen. Now, to our special guests. Hello, Nancy and Neil. Thanks for joining us. How are you? First, Nancy, please.
I'm fine, thanks, John. Thanks for having us on.
Oh, it's a great pleasure, Nancy. And welcome to Neil. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you very much, John. Yeah.
And you're speaking from Lochmaben, right?
Yes.
Aye. And you're speaking...
Unfortunately enough, it's a Tory-controlled area.
Well, you know, so is the UK, but somehow we managed to live with it. And you're joining us al fresco tonight.
Yes, aye.
It's all right. They can't touch you for it. Well, and Nancy, you're joining us from Dunfermline, right?
I am, yeah.
Terrific, super stuff. Now, I was describing the Indy2Cafe, and I mentioned that you'd raised money But tell us in detail, Nancy, what you did with that money you raised in detail.
Well, what happens now, John, is we when we attend a rally, the money then gets counted up and we see how much we raise, and we have a meet together of all the admin teams and decide how much and where that money is going. I think since we started, I think Agnes said to me, because Agnes is our treasurer, we don't have anything to do with the money. She's the banker. She looks after it. That we've raised since we started about £4,000.
Well done. Well done.
We usually average about anything from 200 to 1,000. Well, at the last Glasgow March, we raised just over £1,000.
Well done.
So we met, and then the money gets split up and we decide where it's going. And we try to get that money over to as many different parts of Scotland as we can by approaching our members to see if they will take X amount of pounds to a food bank or a charity in their area.
Yeah. Well, that's commendable. Absolutely commendable. And Neil, what has your experience been?
Oh, I've had great fun. It's actually got me out of the house. It's just wonderful going to marches and appreciating all the people that actually can march, because a lot of the admin team are disabled now and to a certain extent and can't do the marches anymore.
Yeah.
So that's the real reason that we go and feed the troops.
Good for you. Good for you. Yeah. I take it you get a really warm welcome at the marches.
Yes, some of the times, yes. We do, don't we, Nancy?
We do. It's as the marches are growing, because obviously after lockdown and once things opened up, the marches were pretty low. But people are starting to look us out now because they know what we represent. They know that the money that they're going to hand over is going to go to a good cause.
Yeah.
And it's given, I'm a pensioner. The only one that's not a pensioner in the group is Neil's wife, Lorna. I had to get that in because she doesn't like getting called a pensioner. But it's given us a purpose.
Yeah.
And it's doing us all really, really good.
Yeah.
So people now want to be part of that, and they will seek us out so that they can put their donation forward, knowing that that's going to go to a good cause.
Yeah, well, that's very commendable. Nancy, is it possible for you to move your screen a little bit so you're centred, as it were? Because there's a lovely picture behind you. I'd like to see more of it. Move it a little bit. No, that's too high now. Just that's better. That's fine. Just leave it there. You can get far too pickety about these things. What is the picture behind you, by the way? It looks like a couple.
It's just a couple walking in a park.
Right.
Because I'm in my bedroom and I like nice calm things. So.
Well, Neil's outside and you're in your bedroom, heavens above.
Yeah.
Well, you see, that's illustrative of people's involvement in a movement like the independence movement. I mean, I said it was commendable, but it's more than that. It's. I think what you do is life affirming, because you could each of you could sit back and say, "Oh, look, I've done lots of good things in my life, families, all the rest of it," which is incredibly impressive. But you could say, "Now it's time for me to put my feet up." But you two have done exactly the opposite. You've said, "Okay, I don't want to put my feet up. I want to keep being involved. I want to keep out there with the message."
Yeah, John, but it's not just us two. It's everybody else that joins in and helps us.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope people understand that you are representative.
Yeah.
Of the whole Indy2Cafe process, and you mentioned earlier that you sit down and decide how to distribute the money. You said that some of the money went to baby banks, Nancy.
Yeah.
Tell us what a baby bank is.
After the Glasgow March, as I said, we raised just over £1,000, so we were paying out each food bank and baby bank £250. We actually passed 250 because it came on the news that parents were finding it hard to buy baby milk because it's so expensive. So we donated £250 over to Wee Scribbles, or AKA Michael Larkin, because we know how much work he does for a baby bank in Glasgow.
Yes.
So when he got the £250 off, we went out to the supermarkets and purchased that amount in baby milk, and it got sent over to the baby bank in Glasgow. These are the baby banks, and the Homeless Project Scotland have been the hardest ones for us so far. It's easy to give to a food bank and feel good about it. But we actually went into Glasgow city centre to Homeless Project Scotland, and that broke my heart because we were still there when people were starting to queue up, and there was people with young toddlers by the hand or babies in buggies waiting to be fed, and that nearly destroyed me. And I thought, I can't do this, but something kept me going because I'm still at it, John.
Yeah, well, I said that what you guys do is commendable, but I mean, how do you feel about the whole notion that there needs to be baby banks and food banks?
Horrified, but
Horrified,
going back since governments began, there has always been poverty, and I believe it was some point in the 1800s where places started to set up soup kitchens. Why? Why are governments are put in place to look after the people? Why are they allowing the people to go hungry? I mean, it's not right, and especially now that we're now helping baby banks. Really, there's no need for it. We're a rich country, but we shouldn't be having people begging for food on the streets, or people who need baby milk just to feed their babies. That shouldn't be going on.
No. It's a political choice.
It is a political choice, Neil.
And it shouldn't happen.
I mean, there's no question it shouldn't happen. And there's loads of money around. We know that because anytime there's a war, it's possible to finance that.
Yes.
Anytime there's some coronation, somehow the money can be found. And we're not talking peanuts now. We're talking hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
Now, I ask myself, how far would those hundreds of millions have gone to address the needs of the children that you saw?
Yeah. Aye. This is why we went to the Glasgow March as well, rather than go to sit and watch them. Sorry, I'm a bit of a Republican, really.
Yeah, well, don't worry about it.
If you don't mind me calling them an Amy, big ears and noddy were getting crowns in their head, it's just no.
Well, by the way, somebody has suggested that you might want to put a banner up on your gazebo so that you're easier to find. Would that be difficult for you to do?
We have actually got a banner that goes up on the outside the gazebo. Okay. We're also in the middle of getting an actual flag made.
Okay.
That says Indy2Cafe on it. So.
Okay. There you are. Well, obviously, if somebody wants to support you in getting a flag, then I'm sure the money would be very welcome. We've also had a question. Two questions. One is from Robert, who says, wasn't formula milk once distributed free through the NHS?
It was. I remember, when my kids were younger, you would take your child benefit book along to the post office and they would give you milk tokens.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, I really don't know where it's all gone wrong now, that people are having to fork out 12, 13, 14, 15 pound for a tubby baby milk. It's so wrong. This is the food that baby needs to even exist. Why should people be struggling to feed their babies? It's not right.
Well, it wouldn't even be right in a very poor country, as you say.
Exactly.
But it's even worse in a place that's, frankly, if you go to some parts of the UK, and some parts of London in particular, it's a wash in money. Just a wash in money. Now, I'm not suggesting for a minute, please, I hope nobody gets the wrong impression, that there aren't parts of London where this is exactly the case, and they don't have any Indy2Cafe of any kind because there is no system, there's no platform upon which to base what you do. There are people in London suffering just now, but that's a further indictment of the fact that the Westminster can sit there alongside people, almost physically alongside people who are starving. I mean, it's not as if they don't know and they can't see it; it's around them, which is pretty awful.
In the words of Mary Black, it's a sign that the welfare state is failing.
Well, there is no welfare state to speak of. I mean, I think that's probably a busted flush now. The other question that's come in, the question is: do supermarkets offer discount for bulk buys that go to food banks? Do you know if that's the case?
I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I know. I mean, I highlighted it in my Twitter feed this morning that the supermarkets are hiding food now.
Yeah.
If you want to buy a steak, it's not on display anymore because you have to go somewhere and ask. And this is frankly pathetic. It speaks to it's not just that the welfare state is broken down. I think the actual state itself is broken down.
Yeah.
Because you'd have to say to yourself, okay, but how can that be the case? And furthermore, I gather in parts of London that they've had to hide the baby milk in supermarkets because people come in and steal it.
I even heard at one point they were putting those security tags on them.
Yeah.
For food. Really?
I mean, how desperate do you really have to be if you're going to steal baby milk?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be very desperate, aren't you, Neil? I tell you what what sometimes upsets me it is the way the media treats these stories. For me, that would be a top priority. I would say here, I would go out and I speak to each of you in turn. I would speak to other people who are part of the Indy2Cafe. I would talk about the donations you made. It's a story. It's real life about real people with real suffering. Instead of that, I switch on the box and somebody spends half an hour talking about Philip Schofield. And I'm thinking, in what perverted reality is that a priority? In what way is that more important than babies starving?
Yeah.
It tells you something about our value system that we think that now the television companies will argue, oh, it's just a bit of light relief. Well, where's the light relief for mothers whose babies are starving? Where's that light relief? It's like, we've decided. It's just awful, isn't it? Anyway, June Tucker is saying, thanks for the donation for her. Robert Knight saying, thanks for your answer about baby milk, but I thought there was a surplus of milk in Scotland. Not sure where it goes to process it into dried milk. Yeah. But, again, we're back to the point that you made, Neil. It's not as if that there aren't the resources and there aren't the money. It's just somebody has decided not to spend it on people who need it.
The people who should be spending the money on, they don't. They'd rather build bombs or have nuclear submarines or this, that, and the next thing. They'd rather spend it on ammunition and guns than spend it on the people that are supposed to protect, which is absolutely scandalous.
I suppose the cynics would say, bless you, Nancy.
Thank you.
I suppose the cynics would say, austerity is a choice, i.e., the government has decided that.
Yes, it's a political choice. It's a political choice.
Yes.
See, the people in working areas pay more tax than people in affluent areas.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah,
wrong.
it is. Do you think the Scottish Government is doing enough?
Well, they've got the child payment now, which I believe is helping.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing's going to be ever enough. We need to eradicate food banks and baby
Yes.
banks. Our
Yeah.
country's rich enough to be able to feed its people. So,
Yes.
you know, the aim is obviously is to get rid of the lot of them. But I believe the child payment, I mean, I don't know much about it because I don't really know anybody that actually gets it. But I believe it is helping, which, you know, is a good thing. But if you ask me, is it good enough? Well, if mothers are still struggling to be able to put a bottle into their baby's mouths, then no, it's not enough.
And the point there, Nancy, is as well that Scotland works on a limited budget.
Yeah.
I understand that.
You know, I mean, we can only stretch our financial resources so far.
I mean, it sounds like a familiar story that
Yeah.
the Scottish Government seems to spend a lot of time trying to minimise the effect of policies made in London. I mean, for example, we've got the bedroom tax. A whole bunch of money is spent helping people deal with that. Now we've got this. Now these are two essential areas of people's lives, and yet the Scottish Government is forced to spend money to try and mitigate problems caused by somebody else.
Yeah.
Who's not short of a few bob, by the way. That's the reality.
But
None of them are, John. None of them are. You don't hear politicians at all because they're all being well fed. And who's paying for their food when they're out? The taxpayer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Avril Lam is saying that £25 is helping a lot.
Yeah, but it's still not enough.
Of course not. Yeah. What would you like? What level would you like it to be, Neil?
I'd like to see them getting £50 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or £50 a week. Because kids grow up so quick nowadays. I mean, it's the struggle with their clothing, their food, their education, everything.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Gerald Smith is agreeing with you, Neil. He says Neil is correct. The block grant is devaluing, and there's a limit to how much you can tax.
It's not only that. Over the next 5 years, they've got to reduce it by 5% every year.
Yes. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's got to be even worse for our government to try and balance the books.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a serious issue, and I'm not sure what can be done in the short term to help. I mean, the broadcasters are telling us, it's a slightly different question, but it's linked. The broadcasters are telling us that the Labour Party is having a resurgence. Is that your experience?
Labour Party. When do you start with the Labour Party? Well, we start off at the referendum the last referendum, where they promised us
2014.
where they promised us Devo Max, and the very next day took it away.
Now, we're being told from all sorts of places that the Labour Party is having a resurgence. Is that your personal experience when you meet and talk with people?
No, I would say the SNP are certainly more in favour with the public than Labour is round about here.
Okay.
Although this used to be this has always been a very strong Tory area. But Labour have, for the working classes round about here, it's always been Labour they've voted for.
Yeah. What about you, Nancy? Have you seen any evidence of a resurgence in Labour?
No. I mean, in Dunfermline's very much a yes. We're a city now, by the way. We're not a town, we're a city. We got that last year. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but there you go. But I think most people I speak to are all for Scottish independence in Dunfermline. Labour, I would say, I've still got a few supporters there, but how long that will last, I don't know. It'll all depend on what they're coming up with, and I think that by the way Starmer's going to be going down the same route as what the Tories are doing just now, I don't think Labour's going to do very well at all.
No,
especially with the Brexit vote, because Scotland voted 62% to remain, and
Yes.
he's going to try to make Brexit work. Brexit will never work. You know, I mean, even Nigel Farage says it's failed, you know, so if Nigel says it, it must be right.
Well, Nigel knows a bit about failures.
I mean, just look at the state of the country. It's obviously failed.
Yeah, yeah. But you know, I ask this question of everyone, so why should you be an exception? Maybe, Nancy, you could go first. If you were to look ahead 5 years, describe the Scotland you expect to see in 5 years' time.
In 5 years' time, I would hope it would be independent. I want to see independence in my lifetime, and I'm 72 years old now, so I want to see independence in my lifetime. So I would think in 5 years' time we would be independent and seeing improvements, because obviously improvements are not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be as if we're going to get independence tomorrow and then come Friday, you know, everything's going to be hunky-dory. It won't work like that. It'll take a wee while to sort things out, but that's what I can see for 5 years' time, if you know, things progress.
Okay.
And I feel I'm going to see independence.
Okay.
Because I'm refusing to go anywhere until I do.
Well, good for you. But what would you say, though, to somebody who's presently not well disposed to constitutional change and says, I'm frightened of a nationalist party being in power because I wasn't born in Scotland, I don't have a Scottish accent, and I'm concerned what's going to happen to me and my family. What would you say to that person?
I would explain to them how open and diverse we were, and that it's going to get equally better for them as it is for anybody else. Scotland will build itself up to be the great country that it is.
Well, I can understand you saying that, but why should they believe that? What proof have you got? What guarantee can you provide?
I'd have to think on that one, John.
What about you, Neil? What would you say to that person, and what guarantees could you offer them?
Scotland's an open book. We welcome everybody from any walk of life.
Okay, I'm going to continue to be devil's advocate then for a second, if I may. What happens if that person says to you, I believe you, Neil. I've met Nancy, I believe Nancy, but you too will not be in power when independence comes. You won't be in the government. How do I know that your government might not turn around and make my life and my family's life a misery because we're not Scottish? What guarantees can you offer these folks?
Again, I'd have to do my homework on that. I mean, because I could just as easily say, you know, we're an open country. We welcome everybody. We want everybody who lives in Scotland to stay in Scotland. If you've made it your home, you're welcome here.
Absolutely. My question is not about now. My question is about post-independence. And what I'm suggesting to you is that the people who favour constitutional change ought by now have made it very clear to everyone that in the form of a contract that regardless of how you voted in any referendum, that you will be secure in an independent state. And they haven't done that. And I would suggest to you that they ought to have done it by now. And not having done it, they should start doing it.
Yes.
ASAP, immediately.
Yeah.
Yes.
because otherwise, how can you, what possible answer apart from the ones you just gave, which by the way, I applaud, but it's not enough. You have to be able to say, once independent is secured, you will be safe. And you have to have it in writing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I do.
And it's not difficult. It's not difficult. And I
No.
think both you and Neil ought to have that piece of paper that you show to people and say, look, there you are. There it's in writing.
Yeah.
That you and your family will be safe. Right? And somebody said we need a constitution. Well, that's exactly what I'm arguing for. When you've got a piece of paper and that piece of paper says everyone will be treated the same in independent Scotland, then it's categoric. And the party that first becomes the party of power cannot change that. In other words, they're bound to respect everyone in Scotland. It's not a choice. It's a requirement. Because people will say to you, well, yeah, that's okay, very well, Nancy and Neil, but I need something in a contract, something in paper that tells me that I'm going to be okay. Anywho, let's move on. I take it you've got food banks in Dunfermline too.
Yes. Oh yeah.
And
I don't think there's any town or city that doesn't have them. Apparently, we've got more food banks now than we have McDonald's.
Yeah, I mean that's shameful. Neil, where is your nearest food bank?
Dumfries.
Dumfries.
Yeah.
So that's smack in the middle of a Tory seat, isn't it?
Actually Alistair Jack's seat.
Yeah. Okay. But I mean, it's, you would think that somebody in that position would feel the same way that you both do about deprivation. And would say to themselves, I have failed. Until I help these people, I am a failure. I tell you what's terribly ironic here is that when I interview people like yourselves, you generally say the same thing, is that we want to help, we're doing our best to help, but we feel that the people in governments could do more.
Yeah.
Yet the people in government don't agree. They say, these people got themselves into this predicament. It's up to them to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and become tax-paying citizens and not living off the public purse.
The thing is, though, John, how do people get into this situation? What gets people to that point where they have to go to a food bank or a baby bank? What gets them to that point? My husband, at his work, they did a huge fundraiser for Dunfermline Food Bank, and I think it was over £2,000 worth of food that was taken in, and they got to spend a couple of days volunteering in the food bank. And the chap there was sort of doing his wee intro and telling them how it all works. And one thing that sticks in my head was that guy, this was about 3 years ago, that guy stood and said to my husband, most people are one wage away from a food bank.
Yes. Yeah.
I was distraught and I can't lose that.
Well, and one of the reasons for that is that people can't save anymore. There was a time, I suspect, Neil, when we were growing up, that people did save. They could save.
Yeah.
But now I suspect many can't.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just hard these days, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, one in 6 people out of 10 in food banks nowadays are working class, and middle class.
Yeah.
People with good jobs and good wages coming in and good cars at the front door and struggling with everything.
Yeah.
It's just not right. yet they can find £850 billion for COVID contracts that will slosh down the Swanee. They can find money to build Trident missiles. What's the point in having a Trident missiles or a small island off the coast of Europe? Why do we?
Well, I suspect the reason that
Yeah,
Trident
because-
missiles are there is for somebody else's benefit rather than the people here. If I know anything about realpolitik, international politics, Avril Lam is pointing out that it's fuel bills that are crippling.
Yeah,
You know,
But
I've
if
never had a winter like that in my life. I
Yeah.
was absolutely terrified to put my heating on. And
Well,
I like the heat and I like to be comfortable. And I've got an affordable direct debit every month. But it was hard. And even now I'm biting heads off if somebody leaves a light on or if there's a light on when there's no need to be.
Yeah.
And that's just crazy.
yeah.
But that's the way it is.
I mean, I understand why you're saying it, Nancy, but the reality is that a light bulb consumes very little electricity.
I know that. But it's the fact that it's been left on, and I'm trying
That's
to
the point.
economise.
That's
Yeah.
the point. It's the broken window syndrome.
Yeah.
You know, if you let it go, the next thing you know is that you've got 5 heaters going in one
Yeah.
room and all that.
Well, that's right. Well, I was even setting times for what time the heating was to be on and what time it had to be back off.
Yeah.
You know, I was constantly watching the clock.
Yeah.
And now that we've got great weather, I'm getting my washing outside every day, so I don't have to use my tumble dryer.
Now that's the product that consumes most electricity.
I know.
I mean,
But you know, when you've got 4 people in the house and you're
Oh.
washing every single day, you've got to be able to get it dried.
of course. I mean, what are you supposed to do? I mean, you're running
And
a
one
household.
of them's an 11-year-old school child. So
Oh, there you are. There you are. So, Neil, question for you, if I may. Say, for example, you had a magic wand, and if you tapped it on the table in front of you right now, and it could change things, what are the 3 biggest changes you would like to see happen right now? You've got your magic wand, you've just tapped it. What are the 3 things you want to see happen?
no, I'd have to think about that a lot, John.
Oh, just off
Really
the top of
would.
your head.
Off the top of my head, I would like to deal with food banks, baby banks, poverty in general, help the homeless.
Well, these are commendable. I mean, I would rather like to see a few politicians saying those things. If I had a magic
A lot
wand.
of politicians saying those things, but to get them to say that, you'd have to torture them.
Well, let's hope it doesn't go that far. It doesn't
Yes.
go that far. I must say we've had masses and masses of comments tonight. Thanks to you. Somebody's saying tumble dryer's a big no-no. Get back to the old pulley. Well, the old pulley.
well, I've got a clothes dryer, but because obviously there's 4 of us in the house, it doesn't hold that many clothes, and I don't have room for more than one. So
Of course not. Of course not. And not everyone can. I mean, it's a million miles from being the ideal solution. But I'm delighted that the weather has improved, so you're able to get out there and get some stuff done.
Yeah.
Somebody says, I don't mind torturing politicians. Well, there you are. You see, you started something, Neil. Maybe it'll be in the manifestos next
Oh,
time
dear.
round.
We should
Okay,
put that
so it seems to me unlikely that the need for your commendable support will vanish very quickly. In other words, people will still need the monies that you raise. And I know you prefer to do things on a bigger and a wider scale, but you're limited to what you can raise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that determines what you can spend. Do you think there's a possibility that local authorities and others might say, I'll tell you what, for every pound you raise, we'll throw in a pound as well?
That would be wonderful, but I don't know if I'd want to get involved in that, because I wouldn't like others to come along and change what we're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, we started this on our own. We're quite happy plodding on. It would be wonderful to have more money to give, because at the end of the day, £250 to a food bank may sound like a lot of money,
Yeah.
but how long, in theory, does that last? You know, probably that £250 will be gone within a day or two.
Yeah. What about,
Or an hour or two, depending where it is.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, everybody's affected by fuel prices. They're affected by, I mean, you know, I'll tell you what I find terribly ironic is that you spoke eloquently, Nancy, about having to watch the pennies, particularly during the winter time, because of energy costs. If you go to other parts of the world, their energy is subsidized.
Mhm.
You know, there's no question of people being asked to pay extraordinary amounts of money. Now, I'm not suggesting these other places are living high on the hog and they're eating champagne and oysters. Not at all. I'm simply talking about the basics. You know, the governments tend to be much more responsive when it comes to looking after their citizens. And I think one of the major flaws in the UK is that the average person is largely divorced from the political process, which of course leads to all sorts of problems, it seems to me. And it's just too easy once politicians get elected to say, oh, that's it, I'm now here for 4 years, I can forget all these folks. And besides, they're not giving me any money to make sure I get re-elected. But if you were to, again, think about the situation, it's horrendous. All these poor folks are starving. Mothers are bereft. They're just trying to get by from day to day, minute to minute. What could be done just to get rid of all of that, do you think, Nancy?
I think, obviously, and it's never going to happen, I can't see it. I'm a pensioner, as I've said. I've worked all my adult life. I left school at 15 and I worked up until I was 66 years old. And my pension is horrendous. If I just had my pension to live on, I couldn't live.
Yes.
I would be going to food banks. My husband's is slightly better than mine. But even looking at that, it's not enough. You know, if people are going to pay into a pension, then they should be getting something decent so that they can live. I'm not saying to be well off in your old age, but to be able to survive, to keep a roof over your head, to keep your house warm, to be able to eat. You know, just the basic things, John. And it's down to the government to make that happen.
Yeah.
But when people are entitled to a pay rise, well, look at what's going on. They won't even acknowledge that. You've got people working who are struggling and going to food banks as well, and they've got a wage coming in. You know what? That tells you that everything that the government's doing is wrong.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You do know, by the way, that there is no pension pot.
Apparently
No,
so.
isn't.
Yeah.
There isn't. Your pension is paid out of the current account, which is. I hesitate to say that, Nancy, because I'm sure the first thing you'll be thinking is, good God, these clowns haven't actually put my pension anywhere, because it literally doesn't exist. They print the money to pay your pension. And I can say that with some feeling, because when I went round the doors in Milner Thorpe in 2014, a whole bunch of pensioners living on their own said to me, I can't vote for independence, though my heart tells me it's the best option, because my MP phoned me last night to say if yes wins, then the UK government will stop your pension.
That's right.
And I thought that was an awful thing to say to anyone.
Yeah.
And it it completely ignored the fact that the pension service had actually said pensions will continue, because that's what happens when two countries cease to be part of the same unit. There's a
Yeah.
negotiation that takes place over 2 or 3 years. It's not like Brexit, which is an abomination, but there's a process, and there's come and go on either side, which is what you'd expect in the case of Scotland and the rest of the UK. So it was quite obscene to phone someone and say, "Don't vote this way because we'll effectively impoverish you." I mean, that's not a mature thing to say, it seems to me. But these people have now all disappeared, and we can't reach them anymore.
And then we wonder why the pensioners get the blame for the referendum failing.
Well,
Yeah.
Which pensioners get the blame? Are you saying that
Well,
because
they reckon that my now age group back then were the ones who decided not to vote for yes, because obviously they had been scared into voting no.
Well, that may well be the case, but I don't think that was conclusive. I think there were other reasons why that happened, in addition to that. Are you okay, Neil? Everything all right?
Yes, I'm getting messages from the Madam Director over here.
All right. No, we were talking about how difficult or otherwise it is to organise things, but it seems to me that you guys, I hear what you say, Nancy, about 2014. I'm not completely convinced that pensioners should accept the sole responsibility for the outcome.
No.
I think there are a number of factors, and one of them was that there was no negativity on the yes side. I've discussed this before in the program, but I think if you want to win things, you have to have a stack of negative stuff in your locker to fire. I thought the yes campaign in 2014 was too resolutely positive, because what happens then is that the no side went completely negative. I mean, they didn't bother with the facts. They just said, our polling shows that if we speak to pensioners about pensions, if we speak to younger people about this, we can change their minds. And that they were able to do that, and they had the time to do that, because there was no negative stuff coming from the yes campaign, forcing them to spend time defending their position.
Yeah.
And if you look at the way referenda are won, they tend to be won by people who've got yes and no components to their program, i.e., their propaganda.
Yeah.
So I'd like to feel that if there's ever a referendum, there'll be a stack of negative stuff as well as all the positive stuff. And I do applaud people being positive. By the way, I'm not a great favour of negativity, but I know it works because I've seen it work elsewhere. And so you're looking at your own pension, Nancy, and let me ask you first of all, Neil, are you in the same position? Are you finding that your pension has been
Well, I've just got my pension this year,
right?
so I'm actually quids in because I was getting carers allowance prior to that. So,
All right.
Carers allowance, I think, is a scandal as well, because you only get paid for working 22 hours a week.
Yeah.
Even although you're on call 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's just, and you only get paid for 22 hours.
But now you're on a regular pension, right?
Now I'm on my pension. I'm actually got a pay rise of something like 150%. So I'm actually quite happy that I'm retired now.
Well, I'm pleased that you're happy, I have to say, because I would rather you were happy than otherwise.
Even although it's the lowest pension in the Western Hemisphere, I'm quite happy with it.
Yeah. But do you? I mean, is that pension? Does it get Is there an uptick every year? Do you get an increase every year, do you think? Or are you stuck on where you are?
I have no idea.
Well, because the question is, unless it keeps pace with inflation, you're actually getting a decrease every year.
Yes, well, that's quite possible as well. I mean, that's what I suppose that's what we get for a government we don't vote for.
Yeah, yeah. So, how confident are you, first of all, Nancy, and then Neil? How confident would you be, Nancy, if there was a referendum this year that the yes side would win?
I think we would sail it.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
What makes you think that?
absolutely. I would think we would be in the high 60 or 70%.
Right. What makes you think that, though?
Speaking to people, and I've changed quite a few people's minds. I mean, when I became old enough to vote, I asked my dad was a miner, I asked my dad who I should vote for, because, you know, I didn't have a clue. I was born, you know, I was raving it up in the 60s. And my dad told me to vote for Labour because they represent the working man. And my dad was a miner. So I thought, right, okay, cool. And it got, as the years went on, I thought to myself, I'm not going to vote anymore. It doesn't matter what I vote for. They just go and do what they want. And I didn't have a clue about politics. I didn't take any interest in it. Because by the time I got through the 60s and into the 70s, I got married and I started to have my family. And I wasn't interested in what was going on with the world. But yeah, speaking to people now, and a lot of people whose minds have changed actually still voted Labour because that was what their parents did.
Yeah.
And they're now all yes, they would never vote Labour again.
Yeah. What about you, Neil? How confident are you?
Well, considering we started off at 28% last time, and we made it up to 46%, and the feeling for independence has grown quite considerably since then, I think we'd sail through roughly about 85%.
Yet you said earlier that you live in a Tory area.
Yes, I do, but I think things are changing round about here, slowly but surely. Slowly but surely, I think things are changing around about here. They've come to the conclusion that the Tory way is not the right way.
So you're pretty confident then that if
Yes,
there was a referendum this year, that even the people round about you would vote yes.
there's a lot of people round about here that will vote yes, aye. It's quite a rural area, and there's a lot of farmers that have been screwed over by Brexit and all the rest of it that are so angry.
Nancy, what effect do you think Brexit has had on people's voting intentions?
Well, I've got friends who have got holiday homes abroad, and it's caused them no ends of problems. And now so much more expensive to go and stay in that holiday home.
Yeah.
Whereas in days gone before Brexit, we could just get in the car and drive across down to Dover, on the ferry, across the other side of the channel. That was it. No charter stops or checks or having to pay for visas or anything.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, you know something, I regularly, because one of the scare stories you may recall was regarding independence was there'll be customs posts at the borders. And I frequently travel between Spain and Portugal, and there are no border posts.
No.
There's nothing. There's just a bridge.
Yes.
On one side you're in Spain, and the other side you're in Portugal.
Yeah.
And you would never know. Literally, you would never know, except for there's one or two posters saying, welcome to Portugal or welcome to Spain. That's the only thing. And that's because they're all part of the EU. and they have the same, roughly the same rules, they have the same currency, blah blah blah.
Free
And
travel zone.
sorry,
The free travel zone.
well, they got free travel. I mean, there's no restrictions really. But wouldn't that be a problem though? If Scotland were independent and joined the EU, wouldn't that
It's,
definitely
o-
result in border posts and
it's
customs?
only a problem if they want to make it a problem. Do you know? And they're so arrogant that they will make it a problem. So
Don't
see,
you
if
think
they
that,
make it a problem, let them pay for it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, sometimes what happens is that in the real world, politicians posture. They take up positions that they think are popular, but when it actually comes down to cases, they're more than happy to negotiate and take on board other points of view. Um,
Yeah.
that may well be the case that when people get into negotiation, they change things. Now, you know that Gordon Brown is coming to Scotland soon to tell us what we all got wrong and what he has got right. What effect? Because he'll be talking, I think, in Kirkcaldy, maybe, Nancy. What effect do you think Gordon Brown's pontification will have on the people you know?
Not a lot.
I'd
Uh,
have to
I
say
can't,
absolutely none.
personally, I can't stand the man. So I would think most of the people that I know feel absolutely very much the same. I don't think he'll get a big support this time.
Yeah,
I think he's outstayed his welcome.
yeah. What about you, Neil? How do you think people will respond to Gordon Brown?
Away and get back in your crypt. It's nobody around about here has got to pay any slightest bit of attention to what Gordon Brown's got to say.
Yeah. Nonetheless,
Because I've
I,
heard all the
stro-
lies before.
I strongly feel that the media is going to headline his remarks.
Oh, yeah, they will.
They will do, but people will also remember, John, what Gordon Brown did back in 2014 with his vow.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then, if you think about it, what happened was that the SNP hired the guy that ran the vow on
That's
from the
right.
Daily Record.
That's right.
I
Aye.
always found that a rather interesting choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
On one level. Anyway, I gather he's resigned, and maybe if he's aware of the show, he'd be very, very welcome to come on and explain his rationale, because I think that would be interesting and helpful.
It would, aye.
Neil, Nancy, our time's almost up, regrettably. Thank you very much indeed for telling us about the Indy2Cafe. I hope more and more people will support you. I hope they'll buy your sandwiches and rolls at the rallies, and I hope you get an uptick in your funds. I wish you every success because I think you're doing an outstanding job. And sparing your blushes, I'm delighted that you're able to join us tonight and tell us in such detail what it is you do. And I think we're all heartened by that because it's too easy to sit back, as I said, and just lament that things aren't going well. What you guys have done, I'm using the word guys in the broadest sense, is to go out there and make things happen. And I greatly appreciate everything you've done and everything you've said tonight. Thank you again. I hope you can stick around for a few minutes after we go off air.
Will do.
And I just like to say a few closing remarks here. Well, there you are, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks to both Nancy and Neil. And please look out for Elliot Bulmer's column in the Sunday National this weekend. And join us next week at the same time when we will have another exciting guest. As I said at the beginning of the show, at the top of the show, Emma Walker will be here to talk about her treatment by the Lib Dems. You really don't want to miss that show. Stay safe, take care, Look after each other. Thank you and good night.